Okay. I think I'll make it 10 o'clock, so I think it's time to start the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. And I'd just like to first of all welcome the new members who have just joined us from Council, so welcome to the committee. In terms of the running order, I should be moving item 14, which Avtar has come along to talk to us about, which is the External Audit Report letter, to item 5, so we can just after item 5, so we can consider it earlier on in the agenda. So, do we have any apologies on notification of substitutes?
We've received apologies from Councillor Rhys Grattan, Councillor Sharon Ritchie-Simmons and Jim Arnold, the independent member. No substitutes have been appointed.
I move we accept those apologies and move on to pecuniary interests. Any pecuniary interests around the room? No? Okay, we'll move to item 3, which is the minutes. Do I have a mover for the minutes as a correct record? Yep. Okay, seconder. Seconded by Malcolm. I'm going to have a vote on the minutes. Thank you very much. And then we move to public questions. I think there's been one public question from John. So if you want to come up and join us, John, you can read out your question.
Thank you, Chair. This is internal audit performance 2025-26, which is your agenda item 11, and it's about Appendix B. Given the financial emergency declared by Cabinet on the 10th of September, is Audit and Governance Committee alarmed to see that internal audit work on behaviour-based safety, on budget management and debt recovery has yet to be completed? Surely these were ultimate priorities from May onwards.
Thanks, John. So thanks for the question regarding the internal audit work, specifically in the areas of budget management and debt recovery, and its alignment with the Council's declared financial emergency on the 10th of September. The Audit and Governance Committee recognises the critical importance of these areas, particularly in context of the Council's financial position. The internal audit plan for 25-6 was developed using a risk-based approach, which includes full engagement with the Chief Executive, Executive Directors and Section 151 Officer. The timing of individual audits is agreed between the internal audit team and the service area, and whilst both of these audits are currently in progress, it would not be possible to start them earlier in the financial year due to the availability of key staff during the closure of the 24-25 accounts. These are not the only audits that will contribute to the Committee's oversight of the Council's financial arrangements. Reliance is placed on audits completed in the previous year and other audits already completed and in progress in the 25-26 plan year. Whilst the internal audit plays a vital role in providing independent assurance on the effectiveness of governance, risk management and internal control, they are just one part of a much broader assurance framework of the Council. Operational management are responsible for delivering services and own and manage the processes and risks in their service area. Oversight functions such as risk management, scrutiny and legal services provide support and other form of assurance. In addition to all those listed, external audit provide independent assurance for the audit of the financial statements and their value for money assessment. The committee is far from complacent and continues to monitor and deliver the audit plan closely. Updates on progress, including any delays or rescheduling, are regularly reviewed to ensure that internal control environments remain robust and responsive to the Council's financial challenges. And I think you can see that from the agenda we have in front of us this morning. So thank you, John. I don't think we've got any member questions, so we'll move to item 14. I'll invite Avtar to come and talk to us about his external audit letter on period 4.
Thank you, Chair. So just to give context around this, we're at the moment doing our financial statements audit for the year ending 31st March 2025. As part of our work, we look at the arrangements in terms of value for money and the financial sustainability. And we've started looking at that work, and we've had conversations with the Section 151 officer, James, etc. And he highlighted to us the worsening financial position of the council. We would normally report in our audit findings reports and our annual audit letter, concerns around the weaknesses in finances, but given and that would normally come in November, December time. But given where the council is at in terms of its financial position and the declared financial emergency, we thought it'd be proper to actually issue a letter now to actually highlight our concerns earlier, given that we're still doing our audit work, etc. So this letter really just conveys the message that's already out in terms of, the public reports, etc., around the worsening financial position that the council may find itself in, and the position it might be in as at 31st of March 2026. So what we're really highlighting in this letter is the issues around the council really trying to manage its finances and control expenditure to a degree to actually protect its financial position. The consequence of probably going into that negative position, if that does arise, it would be that issuing of a Section 114 notice. That would also mean that we'll issue statutory recommendations around the financial position, and it just triggers a process of more financial oversight, which might involve commissioners, etc., coming in. So we just thought it was right and proper, given the position that the council is in at the moment, to issue this letter to really just, even from an external perspective, to say this is a serious issue, this is serious now, and we've been highlighting significant weaknesses in our audits for a number of years in terms of financial sustainability, and I think this position now is probably worse we've seen it. So we wanted to draw to attention and really just maybe help focus the council's minds in terms of really looking at the control of expenditure going forward, and just to help the financial position going forward. Happy to take any questions or defer to James at the moment for if he's got any comments.
James?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I think it's just important to point out that as part of the work that Grant Thornton do, they are obviously looking at our audit of the financial statements for 24-25, and as part of that work, that's about looking backwards over that, giving committee assurance that the figures represent a true and fair view, and all of the kind of associated governance controls and work that goes around that. But the value for money work that's being done, that is done by external auditors, does take the opportunity to look forward and kind of look into where is the organisation at the moment and where is it going forward. And it's a part of those value for money conversations, which is, as Avtar said, not only with me, but they're also with chief executives, senior officers. Those help to kind of get a view of where the organisation is at this point in time and where it's going. And as part of that, as Avtar said, it feels like it's more helpful rather than just having that within the kind of existing process whereby audit findings will come out later in the year, value for money assessment will come out from that, to bring that forward and actually bring it directly to the attention of the audit committee. And while I think it's really important for the audit committee to consider this, look at this, challenge this, question it, I also think it's really important that it's not just the audit committee, it's the organisation as a whole that needs to be seeing and hearing and feeling these messages and the severity and the difficulty in terms of the position that we are in at the moment. This is why Cabinet declared a financial emergency on the 10th of September. This is why we're trying to align all of the work of the organisation around the right activities to get us back into the right position. I think it's wholly right and proper that our external auditors should flag that. I think it's right in terms of, where do we go next? And that puts us in a very, very difficult situation. So I personally don't want to find ourselves getting into that position. I want to see us working through this problem and getting ourselves back into a more robust situation as soon as we possibly can. But that is not going to be easy. I'll also thank you.
Okay, I mean, from my perspective, I think it's not news to the audit committee, but it is very sobering to read it from a third party like yourself and actually recognise the severity of the situation we are in. Are there any questions about Kate?
Yeah, thank you. And also, I find this isn't a reassuring position to be in, but I find it reassuring that the council has gone to external audit to discuss this really serious issue. I guess I have a question, which is I'm not sure whether you've had a chance to read the peer review because it hadn't been published at the point at which you wrote this letter, and whether you're able to offer any opinion on that direction. But I suppose also just a statement. I mean, it is concerning the amount of money that has been identified that we don't have a plan for. Hopefully that will be resolved. But I guess for us as an audit committee, I realise we've got lots of people for whom this is their first meeting. You know, this is we need to seriously look at how we can support the work of the council to get ourselves out of this financial difficulty. And we have had limited assurance for 6 years now as a council. And so I do welcome the tightening in the peer review of officers at the very top of the organisation meeting regularly. But I think also for us as a committee, we probably do also need to look at how we meet with scrutiny committees. And in fact, we've just been invited to the scrutiny committee chairs meeting, which hadn't happened before, myself and Duncan, vice chair. But I think this is clearly really serious, and we need as a committee to really consider how we can support this work.
Alf?
Just looking at the letter, some of the key drivers that were identified by Grant Thornton, mainly being around adult and child social care being a big drivers on that, and we're seeing that increasing every year. Given your position as external auditors and your requirement as a country, kind of countrywide, is there opportunity to sort of like use some of the information that's coming out from other councils and other audits to give good recommendations on how we can tackle adult and child social care?
Thank you. Just to address the first batch of questions, just to begin with. So as part of that peer review, Grant Thornton were invited to actually meet with the officers and undertaking the peer review, and one of my colleague who does the main VFM work, he was part of that review, and he was aware of the sort of recommendations at that point the peer review were going to make, although it wasn't published, and so we could, it feeds into that, so it is consistent in terms of our messaging with the peer review as well. And in terms of sharing any sort of best practice, we will if we see it, to be honest, and that's the issue we've got. And I was speaking to just colleagues at the moment. These are issues which are facing most councils at the moment to one degree or another. We've seen so many councils now having to apply for EFS funding, and just to have those issues to actually help balance the books because of those drivers. So it's at the moment it's very difficult to say, here, look at X council, what are they doing on this? I think it's a real national issue where a lot of the financial underperformance that is occurring is driven by probably some of the funding that is allocated to these areas, and it's then in the councils, they have to decide how to use that resource, and then eventually it drives the financial position to worse.
Duncan?
Thank you. I'm new to the committee, but not new to reading external audit letters elsewhere. And there's a section in here that does concern me, which is a section about you having to identify significant weaknesses. And there's a bit where it says, and maybe it's just because I'm new that I don't know what this is, but the section that says in our 2023-24 annual audit report, we identified a significant weakness in the council's arrangements for securing value for money with regards to financial sustainability and raised a key recommendation for the council to consider. It doesn't say here what that key recommendation is, and there's an implication of where it goes on that key recommendation wasn't actually acted upon. Is that the case, or?
So as part of our 23-24 audit, we raised this key recommendation around financial sustainability because of the forward-looking of the financial monitoring. We were seeing the high reliance on the use of reserves to balance the budget, the need for capital finance directives to come in, etc. So we were raising a key recommendation around that. So that would be a part of our 23-24 annual audit report and in our 23-24 audit opinion. So we didn't feel the need to put the information again into this letter. We're not saying that the council hasn't done anything about it, but the position has worsened in terms of finances, and we're still really going through our value for money work to actually see how the council did address some of the recommendations raised. But it's hard for me to conclude if it's been done appropriately because our work is still ongoing on that.
Good morning. I struggled with the value of this letter. As you said, it was written after the event with information we already knew in the council. There's a lot of data in there. I didn't find a lot of information there following on from what Duncan was saying about positive actions and so on. So it seemed to be a bit of a, we are where we are, but we already know that. We already know that in the council because the financial emergency has already been declared. So I wasn't quite sure about it. But then the other thing which I generally don't understand, the last sentence says, consider any further actions we take under Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014. Now, I've lost my copy of that, unfortunately, so I couldn't look it up. But again, sort of following from what Duncan's saying, it's all very well alluding to that, but what are those specific actions? I would expect in this letter to say we can do A, B, C and be really clear, because for most people around this table, we're not financial experts. I'm certainly not. I'm just trying to understand what are the actions that can be taken.
So again, in terms of the actions that we're alluding to there, and this will be driven into our, when we do come to our November, December reporting, where we've actually done the work, we draw upon what additional auditor powers there are as based on that act, and that's looking at things like statutory recommendations and the consequences of those in terms of actually drawing special meetings together to say, we found these areas in terms of our review, what are you going to do about it? And it basically draws a committee meeting within 30 days to answer the questions that we pose at that point in time. And it is a sort of a serious measure if we do issue statutory recommendations. It's, in our further reporting, more information will come.
And just, which is fine, it's great. But I would expect that to be in this letter. I would expect that to be absolutely clearly laid out, that says, here are the following actions that could be taken.
It's difficult for us to give the actions at the moment, given that we are still progressing through the work. And until we conclude on our work, we're not in a position to say, this could be option A, this could be option B, this could be option C. We're just alluding to that there's potential more to come from us. But we are just being responsible in terms of, we know that the financial position is at this point where it's at, and we wanted to make sure that you're also getting that serious message coming in from the external auditors, although it's information that you already know, but it's just to really corroborate that this is a serious position.
There has been discussion amongst a number of members in the majority group about what that paragraph means. And, one of the things that Act says is that you can actually go to the courts and ask for action to be taken against the council. So it would have been helpful for it to set out what your options are without necessarily saying what options you would take, because there's been a lot of discussion in the background. Oh hell, what can they do to us? You know, going on amongst members.
I was going to suggest, just that it would be useful if perhaps James could set out for the members of the committee a little briefing note on what the powers, without trying to push you on what you might do, but James can just say, this is what the Act says, and these are the various options available to external audit, just by way of background, because to be honest, I've never heard of this Act before, so it's news to me, and I don't think any of us are in a world where we actually know what the powers you have available to us.
If I may, Chair, just to give a little bit. Ultimately, there's if I remember correctly, there's basically kind of three levels with this. There's providing recommendations, there's significant recommendations, and statutory recommendations. So if you think this one through, significant recommendations have been made last year, so that's suggesting, okay, this is not quite at the level where it's a statutory recommendation. However, what it pulled out was the fact that, as Avatar said, there were savings plans that were not robust, that there were use of one-off reserves, high levels of overspend. There was a number of areas where that was kind of taking us. A statutory recommendation, as has been said, fundamentally, a committee meeting has to be pulled within 30 calendar days, so it's not even working days, so it's very quick that has to be pulled together to respond to that. Now, the question is, what would that statutory recommendation be? So the first bit about what is a statutory recommendation, and that's kind of what it is in a nutshell. The question, the follow-up question though, is, so what would that be? Now, as an example, this might be a bad example, but we're going to follow it through anyway. Had we not had the corporate peer challenge as an example, and we hadn't put in place an improvement and assurance board, for example, with an independent chair, it could be that the external audit would come in and say, look, you've done what you've done so far. Actually, you need to take this another. We are now not just going to kind of make a significant recommendation. We're going to put it down as a statutory recommendation. You need to be put in an independently chaired improvement and assurance board. So if we now wheel back to where we are, there's absolutely no point making that recommendation because that's actually already in place. So I think where Avatar's trying to go is I need to kind of assess where we are and what's being done and what is being and proving successful or not to then decide what recommendation to make. Because in a sense, I've had the same sort of dilemma in terms of I looked at the period 4 position and thought, okay, this has now moved into a potentially illegal position if this continues. What can I do? What else do I need to do? And so the thought process that went through my mind was, I need to talk to Cabinet about financial emergency and actually declaring that and putting something in place that says this is now another level. That's where I think Grant Thornton are at the moment. It's let's assess where we are. Let's see how things are going. It may be that a statutory recommendation is required. I would imagine a significant recommendation is going to be required regardless because of where we are, but we will have to see how things play through, and that's not something we can kind of decipher at this point in time. If that helps.
Any further comments or questions? And just one from me on next steps. You say priority should be given to reducing the overspend across social care services, but obviously, as you said, this is something that all councils are struggling with, and we can't go to this is what best practice looks like. So it's one that we sit, I suppose, as audit, trying to think about how we can ensure that in children and adult services, every step is possibly being taken to divert people away from needing accommodation, and if accommodation is needed, to make sure it's provided the most cost effective and economic. So that's about it, just trying to check with you. It seems to me all we can do, given that there's no other route to us.
It's the process of checking some of these spends that you're doing and just making sure that before it's spent, is it required? And that's across all service lines really. And if you can do that, and then that should sort of hopefully help some of the financial position.
Just to come back, a lot of this is under contracts, isn't it? Because of existing contracts for these. So I suppose it's to the extent to which we can look into those contracts and haven't got the time to do so because they will drive expenditure. And the other next step is the independent appointing of the independent chairs for the improvement board. And I think now I understand the audit committee is that's happening quickly. You know, I don't think there's anybody suggesting to me there's any delay in that process. I'm not sure what the process is, but I think we're, so the next steps as you've set out, seems to me that we're on board with and making good progress on, but I'm just checking that to see if anybody's got a contrary view.
Just very quickly, it wasn't actually no attention was drawn to it yesterday at council, but the second appendix to the corporate peer challenge paper that was the terms of reference for an improvement insurance board. So council have now approved that. That was one thing that we pulled together the terms of reference. That set out what that looks like and how that will work. Ideally, we'd have actually got the chair in place, we'd have talked that through, and then what we'd have to have held a special council then to try and get the terms of reference approved. So it's just, we're trying to get as much in place as we possibly can. The independent chair is in a position now where we are able to appoint to that, and we can get the first meetings in place. I think they're going to start from early November. So this is helpful in terms of getting all of that done. And I think it's about me working with Grant Thornton to work out, is there anything else that we could be doing? Again, it might not be best practice around this is what we could do with social care, but there may be best practice in terms of this is how, for example, an improvement board has worked in other authorities, and this is what's proved to be quite successful. Or even what may be helpful is this is what hasn't worked. And I have got some examples of where authorities have disbanded an improvement board and then reconstituted it in a different way because it didn't quite do what it needed to do. We want to shortcut all of that as far as possible.
So is it reasonable for the audit committee to request or to recommend that this person be appointed by what, mid-October? Is that the sort of timetable we're looking for?
The chair will be appointed very shortly. I think
that's me.
So what I mean by that is like days, but it's about getting then all of the infrastructure in place to get the first meetings in place and whatever. So we're not going to get a meeting in October by now, so it'll be early November.
I'd still like the audit committee to consider making the recommendation that the independent chair is appointed by mid-October, because I think that reflects the urgency of the situation. My other question is, what happens to this letter from here? Will it go forward to cabinet from here, or does it just stay with the audit committee? What's our feelings? Because a lot of these, I mean, we are the people who check and review, but a lot of the actions here are needed to be taken by other people in the organisation, it seems to me. So a view on that.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it's for this committee to be making that recommendation. It's obvious that it's moving at pace anyway. We can note, considering what this item's about, it's about noting the letter and sharing our concerns. But the whole point of the letter was to reinforce for the council to focus minds, and that's been done. We as this council shouldn't be putting arbitrary dates on. That's been done.
So it's Malcolm first, then Kate, that's all right.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, your question was, should this go to full committee? I'm not sure this is adding any value to that, as I mentioned previously. It's not adding anything new that is not known in full council and all the other councils. So it's another piece in the jigsaw, but for me, it's not adding anything different or new. Whether that therefore adds value to taking it to full council, I don't know.
Okay, it was cabinet rather than council, actually, but the point still stands, yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of the draft terms of reference for the Improvement and Assurance Board, there are a couple of mentions of the Audit Committee. I just wanted to highlight. So one of their aims is to assure key stakeholders, including the Audit Committee and the Scrutiny Committees, about progress in delivering the agreed improvement plans. But there's also a recommendation with regard to the annual governance statement, and that it appeared to be, I can't quite remember the exact wording, but overly optimistic And I do think that's an area of work for us to consider for. We don't have, that doesn't come up for a little while, but I just wanted to note those points.
It seems like the mood of the committee is to note the report, and thank you for your presentation. And if that's, I'll move that from the chair, the seconder for that. Duncan will second that, and just a vote on that. Thank you, After. Okay, the next item then is item 6, a lantern management update. Don't know if anybody's come to talk to us about this. Shall we defer, move something else and see if somebody's able to come, or do we know? We'll move on to item 7 and then see.
Can I just on this? Sorry,
yeah,
just a question about the report itself and my understanding of it. So there's a whole series of recommendations and actions which are complete, and there's an assurance level of unsatisfactory. My question is, have the actions been done and it's still unsatisfactory, or was it unsatisfactory and then the actions have subsequently been done and we need to reassess it?
I think we need to explain all that, but I think we're just into discussing the item if we do. So I understand, I had the same perceptions you did when I read it, but I think there's an answer to that. But I think we'll come back to it if anybody's able to join us. If they're not, we'll have to consider it without them. So we'll move on to item 7 and then come back to 6, I think is probably the best way of going forward. Item 7 is agency and consultancy staff and management update, which I think is a report from James.
So Sam Collins-Lafferty is joining us online, and she will be able to take us through this report, and then we'll between us deal with any questions that the committee may have. So Sam, are you okay to pick up?
Yeah, thank you, James. Good morning, all. Yep. Just in terms of the update, so it provides an update on the Shropshire Council's progress in implementing the internal audit recommendations relating to the use of agency workers and consultants during the 24-25 period. It highlights the management actions taken to improve governance, compliance with policies and procedures, but also reduce costs. Just note in terms of the report, it does not include the Council's transformation partner, PwC. Within the report, you'll note the internal audit has assigned the audit as unsatisfactory, identifying several recommendations to enhance controls and compliance in engaging agency and consultancy staff. I'm pleased to say of the 12 recommendations, 10 have been implemented, while 2 are still remaining in progress. It's anticipated, in line with the new national procurement legislation, that this will be in early 2027. Governance enhancements have been made and include a number of areas as detailed within section 7 of the report. We've worked in terms of updating the information and guidance on our internal intranet. We've had revised terms of reference for the organisational wide workforce board, which is chaired by the executive director for DAS, who's now the interim chief exec, and the executive director, section 151, with senior finance and HR representatives in attendance, where all requests for agency or consultancy are considered by the board. At that point, management cannot proceed until they've been to that appropriate board. We also implemented some hard stop comms, again reinforcing the message around mandatory use of Opus, who's our new provider for agency workers, around the transitioning of all existing kind of off-contract agency workers to Opus, and no new agency suppliers being set up. And again, reinforcing that message with regard to the organisational wide workforce board approval. We've enhanced finance dashboards and again kind of spend control boards, again to kind of monitor agency spend, supplier usage, and making sure that there is that compliance with the contract and procedure rules. I suppose what's important to note is whilst we've implemented those recommendations. Managers do have delegated budgets and responsibilities, which they're responsible and accountable for. Policies and procedures are in place for managers to adhere to ensure that kind of continued compliance with the improvements made and the reduction in the use of non-contracted staff, where managers need to make sure that they're following kind of process and creating their workforce plans that reduce kind of the reliance on agency workers within the organisation, and actually that these are only used when necessary. When important to note, when the recommendations were issued, the council did transition from Matrix to Opus People Solutions, which were accessing via West Midlands temps. So that was implemented on the 21st of October 2024. Opus does specialise in public sector and work in partnership with us as the council, but also many other local authorities across the region to source temporary workers. Their aim is to enhance our workforce planning, provide better visibility and control over our temporary workforce, but also making sure that there is that high quality provision, but also that it's at a cost effective for us as a local authority. There's a number of benefits that we're experiencing with Opus at the moment. So again, one is around saving money by recruiting through Opus compared to other external agencies where we can find ourselves being subject to kind of fees. They're locally based teams as well. So again, that's of benefit, but also they invest in the public sector. So they're committed to returning the money back into the councils in our partnership, which is really positive. And we're starting to see that come to fruition through career events and social value, etc. You will have seen within the report that there is a significant reduction in agency expenditure received, which is really positive, with our costs falling from 13 million in 2022-23 to 9.4 million in 24-25. So again, this is despite all the national pay awards that we have to adhere to, but also the increase in national insurance contributions that many employers have faced. We anticipate that there will be a further reduction in 25-26, and work is still continuing with that work. Whilst progress is evident, as I say, continued efforts amongst managers and officers are necessary to reduce the reliance on non-contracted workers, to maintain that governance and ensure compliance with the procurement rules and financial rules. Thank you. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Well, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. A very thorough report. Are there any questions for Sam? Malcolm.
Yeah, hello. So just want a couple of questions on the table at 7.2 and the recommendations and the actions. So recommendations, actions, but what I don't get is have those actions close the recommendation. It just seems to be do this, we've done this, but I don't see that that's actually closed it and completed that. That's the first point. Second point is the review dates are 6+ months ago. So I'm not quite sure. What does that mean? Does that mean the last time anyone's looked at this is over 6 months ago? And my third question relates to a couple of them specifically. The second piece about contract procedure rules, and the second to last piece on the bottom of page 23 about, again, contract procedure rules, both say work continuing with procurement since February 2025. The first one says have a page on the intranet. So it seems to be 7 months and we haven't put a page on the intranet and it's still continuing, which, how long does it take to do that?
Okay, Malcolm, are you able to answer this question, Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yeah, in terms of the recommendations, the management action on the tables, that's what work has been underway. The review date is the date that we look to implement our actions. As you've rightly picked up, there is some within the control within kind of the HR world that I'm responsible for, and we're working as part of the working group with procurement in terms of the updates with regards to the contract and procedure rules. Now, unfortunately, just because of resource issues within the procurement team, that's where they're looking to provide that update in early 2026. But in the meantime, we've made sure that there is that kind of cross-check, that reference for managers when they're viewing the information and guidance on the intranet, that they are adhering to those rules. But the complete comprehensive kind of update is anticipated in early 2026.
Okay, Malcolm? Yeah. Okay, Kate?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at the table on 5.2, and I know you've said that there has been a reduction in spending since nicely selected 22-23, I think you said. There appears to have been a fairly steep rise in spending from April until, I think, August.
Yes.
Have I read that right? And what's that about?
Yeah, okay, thank you for your question. So yeah, the spike in the data is due to the backdating of invoices, and actually had those invoices been processed and paid at the month that the work was carried out, as you've referenced there, then actually that graph would have shown more of a flat line. I think what's important when we're reporting on in terms of that spend, we're just reporting what's in the ledger, not when the works is carried out. Again, that spike was also because we were transitioning a number of off Opus agencies onto Opus. So therefore, as a result of that, that then led to the slight delay in terms of timesheets, etc., coming through in terms of the ERP. But as I say, had it been in the system at that time, that actually we wouldn't have seen that spike.
Thanks. So could you just give us a little bit of detail about what those unpaid invoices, which area of the council they came from?
Sam, just to kind of explain, what you're seeing is a spike in March and then effectively no costs in April, and then it spikes back up again in May. And it's literally because of the close down procedures. So what happens is that you're rushing to get all of the invoices through, and they will be spread across the authority. You're trying to get all those invoices in March, or things are being raised in March or being accrued back into March. And then as a result, it's not that we didn't have any agency in April. It's just that there's no processing done in April because everything is being thrown back into March. You then pick up the processing in May, and lo and behold, it all goes up because you actually got effectively 2 months worth. Now, the reason it's done like this is because that's how the information is sat within the ledger. It would be an absolutely mammoth job to pull every invoice out of the ledger and then say what period does that relate to, and then put it into some sort of a outside of the ledger system to do that. What this does show, however, is you can see it spiking up and down, and you can see broadly it follows the same trajectory. Therefore, it means that, for example, if you're working along that green line, which is the target, if we've got the line going along that route and then go, so as long as we just keep it low in March, then we'll be okay. The reality is we know it's going to spike up in March because that's what tends to happen. So it's useful, but it's not. It's not entirely kind of insightful in terms of the way that the work is being done. It's just purely in terms of the way those are being processed. There may be at different points in the year and from different teams and services, there may be backlogs that build up in certain areas. And Sam may have some information around that she can talk through, but the fundamental is more around the way in which those invoices get processed. Does that help? Possibly not.
Just to a point, but August it's kind of continuing to go up.
I'll come in on that. Just in terms of the August, had the invoices not been processed within the ERP on the months that the work was carried out, we wouldn't have had that spike. The reason why we had that spike is because we had an external off-Opus agency supplier come on to Opus that then led to that spike in August, because unfortunately there was delays internally between the new between kind of Opus and the provider that came on to Opus in terms of processing those invoices, hence that spike. Had it all been okay at the point that they were transferred onto Opus and those timesheets signed off at the June, July, etc., that August spike would not have happened. So I don't want you to think that there is an increase in spend, because that's not the position.
Thanks, Sam. It clarifies it in my mind. Mark?
Yeah, I actually understood what Sam meant and what the original question was. My confusion was the comment about March. And when I saw the comment about March and the spike there, that's what confused me. But so Sam's explanation made complete sense for the August for this year.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, thanks, Sam. The recommendation is to note the report. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Nobody wants to move it. Oh, Kate moves and Nigel seconds. So we can just have a vote on that and we'll move on. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you,
Sam.
Chair.
Thank you. The next item then, and I think David's joined us, is the Children's Social Care Budget Management Update. So do you want to come and take a seat, David?
Good morning, colleagues and councillors. My name is David Shaw. I'm the Director of Children's Services. So I'm here to present the report relating to children's social care and the budget management update resulting from the internal audit that took place earlier in the year. So as you have seen from the report outlines the 7 recommendations that have been made. It states the update as it stands currently within each of those specific recommendations, and the report makes 4 recommendations that I will be taking forward at pace to ensure each of those 7 recommendations are completely closed and reported back to this committee in the November meeting. It's also worth noting that I've asked for all of the internal audit reports that have been completed for the last 3 years, so I can see the pattern recommendations where we've closed aspects, where we haven't closed aspects, and I'll be reviewing each of those accordingly with service managers and the service director as we work our way forward. I think it's important to note within the report, whilst there are areas identified for improvement and development, there is clearly a strong sense of control within the work that's going on in children's services. I've also noted in the reports as well that this is triangulated by our external auditors, but also Ofsted as an independent regulatory body. So whilst we're specifically just looking at the financial controls in this particular meeting, it's important to put this in the context of the wider regulatory frameworks that are operating within children's services. I think for assurance of the committee, it's also worth noting that whilst we do continue to see pressures and challenges within the financial envelope within children's services, and specifically in terms of the budget monitoring and activity around this area, myself and the auditors are very clearly of the opinion that as an outstanding authority within children's services, we will continue to see spend reduce over time. And that might be something that audit committee seek independent validity from Grant Thornton as the independent auditors. I had a conversation with them last Friday as part of the normal work around the reports, and they confirmed that they have recently completed some work around that nationally. So that might be something that actually audit committee seek to verify and just provide some level of timescale in relation to that. Your obvious question to me will be, well, that's great, David, but when are we going to see the pressures come down? And that is the fundamental challenge, colleagues, in terms of this. We are not able to remove young people that are in vulnerable situations immediately. And I have to, as the statutory director of children's services, be really clear with you all around that. But what I absolutely can say is we are seeing fewer young people entering the care system and increasing numbers exiting the care system, the net difference of that will have a positive impact on the overall children looked after numbers, as was reported in the paper that went to council yesterday. So I'm sure that was a question, but I thought I'd just put that on record to start with. I'm very happy to take any questions relating to the audit report at this point in time, but do recognise that I can't at this point come to you to say, as I've heard from questions in other reports, are all these closed yet? Not yet, but they will be, and I'll be back here in November to present that to you.
Thanks, David, and thanks for preempting at least one question. Are any questions for David? No.
Yeah, I think in comparing this report to some of the other ones, I think this is really refreshing to see there are clear sets of actions, owners, deadline dates, etc., etc. This is the sort of report I would expect to see across the board. So thank you. But there's always a but. Of course, there is. A lot of them have dates of next week, end of September, stroke end of October. How confident are you that you'll hit those dates?
So absolutely, I think that's a fair comment. So what I would say is I've picked some services up in its entirety since August. To be fair to all colleagues in children's services, we've focused, and I think rightly, on the inspection preparation and the outcome that's been delivered. So that's certainly not an excuse in terms of we've left things to fester. But I will do all I can to ensure that those deadlines are met. What I am absolutely certain of is, even if we're stretching the end of September deadline, we will complete by the end of October. That's a fundamental one. There are some wider challenges that are beyond my immediate teams that I think are equally important. Some of the recommendations relate to finance colleagues' capacity, and I think we need to be mindful of that in terms of where we're looking at reallocation of budget owners, cost centre owners. There are some really practical things that my teams can do the identification of that will need support and implementation from other colleagues. So that is work that we need to do. But again, I'm confident that we've got James and colleague support in ensuring that is happening as swiftly as we possibly can in the main.
Thank you. Carl?
Thanks very much. I'm finding it all a little bit difficult to answer. This is quite a mature, kind of department, the council child. It's been around a while. And some of the recommendations that we still haven't got complete on, that has already been pointed out, got dated next week, are very basic, and is really worrying. I'm not going to wrap up, say them all off, but budget holders not completing reports, agency staff warranting overpayments of staff who have left, timesheets not being filled in accurately. Like I said, I don't want to, there's quite a few around risk that come to attention, and I think what I'm kind of getting at is, these shouldn't really be happening now. These are basic, fundamental ways to run this department, and here we are with massive overspend, with basic requirements and recommendations constantly being picked up. Why really is it?
So I think some of that challenge is fair in terms of some of those points. I think the challenge within the service is the complexity of the budgets and how those budgets are identified, worked through, the systems behind all of that. I think that's certainly something that we're working to address, but it's not been a quick fix at all in terms of those areas. I think it's also important to say that part of the challenge around budget codes, we have moved members of staff around within the services for operational reasons to improve effectiveness of the service work and delivery, and those changes haven't always been updated or reflected therefore in the financial situation and the budget monitoring, and that's where those issues arise in terms of that. So some of those are absolutely fundamental, simple things that should be addressed and are being addressed in terms of that, but it doesn't change the overall fact that even with those colleagues in different places, those colleagues will either come together to complete the budget monitoring with our finance business partner, and that absolutely has and does happen. So that is the first assurance in terms of that process. But it's equally then, when any decisions are made, as I've stated in the report, it is a group of officers that consider in terms of the reservist practice and the most efficient ways of discharging whatever support or provision is required. And that's fundamentally the choices that are made within the spend that happens in each budget. More recently, as I've outlined in the report, we've introduced the additional spending control. So up until August and then September, previously any out of panel decisions were picked up by the two service directors. Since we've introduced those increased spending controls, that doesn't happen. That comes to a panel which is myself, commissioning colleagues, finance colleagues, and service director and service managers for that multi-agency, multi-view in terms of that scrutiny and grip. That's been really helpful. It's thrown up a number of areas where actually we think we can save money through changes to contracting, commissioning, block contracting work, different arrangements. And some of those challenges you might say, well, shouldn't that have been in place, David, before? Absolutely. But it hasn't been for a variety of reasons in terms of resources around our commissioning function, which I think has been well rehearsed within various different parts of committees. So absolutely, some of these challenges are there. I think I won't go into the challenges within some of the ERP system because all councils, large organisations have some kind of ERP system that works in that way. Would we improve ours? Probably, possibly. It's making that as easy as possible for practitioners on the ground to do, because whilst absolutely my mantra is they are a budget holder, they're a manager, they're a leader, they equally have service operational challenges that they need to discharge. So again, I am looking at how we can support that through some different changes to the operational structures within children's services, and those conversations are underway again at a pace we can get those things in train, ideally by January 2026. There are some of the challenges. I'm happy to pick up any particular individual aspects of this. You may have drawn attention to the wider risk register aspect. So again, that's been picked up through a full review of the risk appetite risk registers in light of those three different areas: the audit committee report, the wider Ofsted report that we've had, but also the CPC, and just making sure we've got all those areas triangulated accordingly.
Single point of failure on the finance team. James, is that your team or is that finance team within child services?
That will be within James's team.
Okay, I feel that. And then, the last one, and I don't know if my colleagues have come across this. I certainly haven't come across it. It's significant. RC086. This is where adult social care budget is taken out of child social care budget, and 1.2 million, a lot of money.
So in terms of, this is the recommendation 6 in relation to the saving line. Is that what you're referencing? Yes. So this is, I think, back to when we were a people directorate and what we worked together between children and adults really, really closely. And we looked at as an organisation to say we need to make this level of saving. How might we do that? And again, it's where those savings lines were landed in terms of that work. So for us, it was a case of actually how do we work through that? When Audit looked into that particular saving, the RC086 was related to an adult social care efficiency saving. It was allocated within the overall people directorate. It was part of that wider organisational cost reduction, cost saving that we needed to make. That hasn't been that wasn't included in the social care work that we've done. But again, from our perspective, we've got very clear savings lines, trackers in place for this current financial year. We're working hard and well to achieve those. Any additional overachievement once we've delivered all of those will be applied to the wider council savings lines wherever they are. And that can be a conversation that happens within the leadership board and our exec team. Whether that answers your question or is a specific question that you want to get into. I think it's probably related to how those savings lines were listed when we were in a combined children's and adults directorate rather than anything else.
Help James at all, or?
Yeah, so it's as David described. I'll try and come at it from a different angle and see if that'll help. But when the budget was set for this for the financial year, there were a number of overarching savings around things like third-party spend, resizing and right-sizing around staffing reductions. And it was an agreement that was, as an organisation, we're going to have to work through the detail of how they can be delivered. It wasn't just a case of this particular service area can do A, B and C. It was a case of how do we do this as an organisation, which will then impact on each of those service areas. So each directorate, as it was allocated a level of those savings. Those were apportioned into the people directorate in this particular example. The savings that were put forward by the service then came to a level but didn't pick up, didn't cover those other savings. I think what's been shown here is that there was some overachievement in other areas that had been put forward, and those were therefore helped to kind of chip away at that. But there was no solution to finding those savings, so they remain undelivered. So the point that's been made here is that they weren't children's in that sense. They still are. They're still the organisation savings, whichever way you look at it. So the problem hasn't gone away. It just means that it's not been dealt with so far.
Any other questions? Yeah, just a note for me, really. We talked about the panel and we talked about the Children's Spending Control Board. It would help if you can give me a bit of background as to how they interrelate and what goes to each, because I've just a bit more detail ahead of when you come back in November. So I don't know if anybody else wants that, but it'd be useful if you can give me a bit of background. You don't need to do it now, just send me something. That's easiest.
Absolutely.
Okay,
thank you. I think it's probably important to say that we're making sure that visibility is there with our portfolio holders. So Councillor Ruth Houghton is cited on all of that, but I'll do a specific note. And again, we've shared with Councillor Houghton the detail that comes through. So again, that visibility and transparency is as clear as possible.
That's it. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues.
Moving on then to, we need to note the report, don't we? So I think the recommendations are to note the actions, and you're coming back to us in November. So, when it comes back in November, we can see where things here. That onto the minute. And now move it for that. Do you want to move that, Duncan, then?
I will move that. James is waiting. So
that's
fine. Before you go on to the next slide. Yeah.
No. Deal with this one. Yeah, I'll move that. Do a seconder for that. Second it and just put that to that. Thank you very much. James, then.
So just very quickly, item 6, the lantern. We've followed it through. It turns out the individual who's going to come along is off assigned sick today, and their manager is unable to make a meeting because they've got an HR issue at 11 o'clock. So the options are defer it or to take the paper without them. But
I think I'd prefer to defer it and have a consideration at next meeting. It's been a long-standing item. It might look quite small scale in terms of issues, but it's gone on a long time, back to 2021, I think. So I do think we just need to have the manager with us. So is that okay? So that item will be deferred. Thank you, James. So we move on to, I think Tom's going to speak to us about the risk register.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Dodds. I am the Council Strategy and Scrutiny Manager and Statutory Scrutiny Officer. And risk management sits within my little bit of the world. So I'm conscious we've got some new members on the committee as well. So I'm not going to go through the report in detail. I suppose what I really want to be able to just say is that the strategic risks are reported through or shared and reported to this committee at key points in the year. There are 2 review points which take place in the year. That takes place with the risk owners. So you can see them listed in the table on 7.2, but also all of the strategic risks are looked at by the leadership board as well on a cyclical basis. I think that, so we'll look at 7.2 or table 7.5, sorry, as the last time that I think this came to the committee, you said that you wanted to have a better view of direction of travel. against those risks. So there's 10 risks in there, plus one that's in development. You can see that those columns have been added in now. So you've got the 2-year view within the report. You can get a sense of what movement there is. Certainly over the last 2 review cycles, there's not been any change in those, the risk scoring, which is in there. The other thing I suppose I would want to highlight now, and you've touched on it already, is this report was developed following a review that took place in June. That was prior to the Corporate Peer Challenge, and prior to the announcement of or confirmation of the financial emergency, and the next review cycle that's coming up with senior officers is in this autumn. And therefore, I think, again, when you look at the strategic risks identified there, there's a very strong correlation to the recommendations and the key points that came out of the Corporate Peer Challenge as well. So there's a natural need to look at the strategic risks, I think, against the against what's been fed back to the council coming forward. So that's really the run through. Happy to take any questions. The only thing I guess I would add in relation to this is it's almost like an information report to you. Much as I'd love to, I can't answer all the questions about all the specific service areas and issues in here. So if there are things which are there which you want to follow up on, I think it's a good chance to invite the relevant leads back to provide that information to you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Yeah, quite a few. Right, okay, we'll go with Mark first, and then Malcolm, and then Carlos.
It's not so much a question, it's a case of, as a new member, I saw table 7.5 and went, wow, which I think is probably everyone's reaction. I'm just looking forward to seeing what happens in the upcoming review to see how it's affected. That's all.
So yeah, I think the review will be an opportunity to. So the conversations which take place to create these scores are based around the existing strategic risks which are there. So that's where you see that continuation. I think the review this time round needs to include have we got the right strategic risks in that respect? Yeah.
Malcolm?
Yes, so also on that table. So observations, in the last 2 years, no risk has improved. They've either stayed the same or got worse. Not a good position to be in. But as you say, this is information. It doesn't. My question is, I guess, where are the action points to reduce the likelihood, the mitigations? Where are the action points to reduce the impact, the contingency, and how do we do that? And why are those actions not making any difference in the last 2 years? And it may not be for you. I don't know who that question is for, but that's my immediate observation on that.
You want to just take Carl's question and then I'll come back to Tom on the other side.
Yeah, mine's more of an observation really, but it's always good to see cyber attack and ICT at the top of that list, and I hope that always stays high and stable at that. One of the concerns, just given obviously the item that we've just completed, was the impact on CPRESs, including social care, and that remains stable. I'm just given what we just listened to, surely that should have increased from 20 to 25, because the two main drivers of the problem of this council at the moment is social care. Yeah, we only seem to have a lower risk of 20. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay, Tom, any comment on those? No, sorry, James, do you want to go?
If I come in just in terms of that's the first points, and then hand over to Tom for anything he wants to add. In terms of the table itself, yes, that's kind of the point. I think if that table wasn't read, you would say, well, what's the point of the strategic risk process? Because you're clearly not reflecting what the situation is within the authority. It's really, really important. I know everybody understands this, but I always say the same thing. This is an assessment of the risk. This is not reality. This is not what's happening. This is the level of risk, the likelihood of a risk happening, and the impact. And to go back to the point in terms of nothing's improved, and linking in with the cyber security one, David Baker, head of IT, comes along regularly to the audit committee. and he talks this through, and I think in a very sensible way, in terms of, in his opinion, that cyber risk will probably never move from a 25. In his opinion, he thinks that the likelihood that if we pretend that we are not going to be vulnerable to a cyber attack, then we're just deluding ourselves in a sense. The world is always shifting constantly in that direction, and what we need to, so the likelihood is probably not something we can ever shift from a 5. In terms of the impact, well, constantly we're trying to manage the impact of that, but the reality is that, you know, if something hits and it's very low level, well, that's not a problem, is it? But it's the fact that you can't decipher who's going to hit you, and therefore the impact of that could well be enormous. And we've seen organisations across the world that put masses of amount of time and effort, money into cybersecurity, still getting hacked and still getting held to ransom, etc. So it's not a question of, in those instances, how can we bring them down? It's what can we make sure that we put in place to try and ensure that we're staying ahead of the game. But the reality is, and I've had this debate with David, I'm saying, well, surely we can put things in place which then say, well, we can reduce the impact. And it's like, yes, but. And so that's the way the debate goes. When you look at the risks around the financial position and around the staffing position, you only have to look back to the corporate peer challenge and say, is there anything in that corporate peer challenge that is not reflecting that these risks are the things that are being identified within the organisation? I understand the frustration in terms of, so what is it you're doing about these? We can't see what you're doing about them. All of that is being played out constantly in conversations. And as Tom said, senior officers are looking and reviewing, considering this and making sure that we're doing the things that we can. When we do these regular workshops, what we're doing is we're looking to say, okay, well, are the risks the right risks? Are they actually reflective of where we are at this point in time? And then we're looking to see, okay, so what's our kind of plan for where we'd like to get these risks to by the end of the year, or within the next 2 years, or within the next 6 months, or whatever it might be. That's the bit where I think it would be helpful to kind of see and hear some of what that kind of those conversations are about. And it might be that we were able to kind of pull some of that more into these reports going forward, so that Audit Committee could take a view on that. In terms of the new administration, we're new into that, so we haven't yet got the cycle in place whereby Cabinet are being regularly updated in terms of these risks, because we've been reviewing them ahead of then taking a paper through to the informal Cabinet. So I'm not really answering any of the questions there, but I'm just trying to give you a bit of a background and hopefully some assurance in terms of there is a reason why this is like it is.
Carl? Yeah, just to come back, I just want to make it clear, when it comes to the ICT risk, I agree that should never come down for 25, and I hope in my time in this council that stays at 25, because when you do start bringing that risk score down, that's when the foot goes off the gas, and that's when the attacks happen, and then we could be in serious trouble then. So that, I just want to put my point across there.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose it's just a sort of broader question about who this is for, in a sense. So we have to assess risk, obviously. Not doing so, we would not be in a very good position. But I suppose it's daunting looking at this, and is this about us evidencing just how much risk we've got in terms of, maybe kind of protecting ourselves in terms of, any future problems down the line. I suppose one of my concerns is looking at the 7.7 pie chart, and another member has noticed this. At what point does it become overwhelming? How much is it just, yes, we are in a terrible position, and the actions, it feels almost unachievable. So I'm just wondering, it is all very red, isn't it? And how, in terms of there's how do we manage all of this risk? It's not a good position to be in. Is there a way of us looking at risk slightly differently?
Just for your answer to add to that, I mean, our risk appetite is only to have below medium, isn't it? So it does seem a huge mismatch between the actual risk we're experiencing not going away and what we profess as our risk appetite. And I don't think I mean, something's got to shift on that. Either we find ways of reducing the risk down to our risk appetite, or what we say is our risk appetite clearly isn't our risk appetite, because we're having to treat the risk far higher than we profess. And I don't know who sets the risk appetite, where that goes back to.
If I can share, if risks fall below our risk appetite, then what we're saying is we're willing to accept those risks. Now, there is a debate to be had about where that risk appetite sits and where that falls. And an example, and this might be a controversial example, but I'm going to go with it anyway. If you think about, let's look at an example of a child coming into care in social care. Okay, you've got two risk appetites there. One is around the safety of that child, and one is about the financial viability of the organisation. The risk appetite in terms of the safety of the child is very low, I would say. So therefore, we don't take risks around the safety of the children, and I'm not going to disagree with that. However, when you then look at the financial position, actually the risk appetite there is very high. So we're willing to take that child. It's going to cost us money which we haven't got. Okay, but that's the risk we're going to have to take, because so if you think about it in that way, a lot of these risks relate to ultimately the financial position of the authority, because what we're not able to do is to put the resources and the capacity in the right places in the organisation to start to mitigate these. So it starts to become, if we're not careful, a vicious circle. And what we've seen over the years is the financial position has not been tackled and improved in the way that it needs to. And you're starting to see these risks then ratcheting up, because people are saying, hang on, there may well be, as part of this review, more risks that are added to this that fall over our risk appetite. My personal opinion is, we don't shift that risk appetite. I don't think we should be saying, okay, well, we'll just accept more of this because of the reality we're in. The quid pro quo of that is, you're going to see more risks and there's going to be more red. And so what's the way out of this is the question. So if we set ourselves a sustainable plan for the future, and we say, as an organisation, we are going to shift the way that we work. We are going to be doing much less in terms of delivery in the way that we are at the moment. We're going to look at more automation. We're going to try and take complexity. We're going to reduce the scope of the authorities. There's less things that we are directly delivering, and reduce that down. And we get ourselves into a more sustainable position. Part of that sustainable conversation has to be, and how do we manage the risks that are within the authority that enable that? So there's no point saying, okay, we're in a sustainable financial position, but we're not able to recruit and retain staff, for example. Or there's no way we can put a tap on the way that costs within adults and children are going through, which just means that constantly we're going to be fighting against a kind of an uphill battle. So the light at the end of the tunnel is ultimately an overarching strategic plan for the organisation that's going to take 2 or 3 years to deliver. These are not going to turn from red, therefore, in the next 6 months. That's the reality of where we are. And I think, what you need to get you need to be assured as a committee that this is not just we'll produce this every quarter, and it's the same thing, and no attention's being paid to it, and it's all okay because we've told everybody it's kind of a problem, and so therefore kind of move on. You need the assurance that we're actually taking this seriously and we're trying to tackle these things, big things within there. It's just not going to happen overnight.
Nigel?
Yes, as a member that's been on the old audit one for the last 4 years, this was the hardest one to accept. I disagreed with it vehemently when I started. I had additional training where I was told what it was about, and I still disagreed with it. And then it was only when we called David Baker from IT to explain why we couldn't put the impact down and the likelihood, because he was explaining that we have mirror systems. If we have an attack, we can go to a mirror system. And so we were really reassured that we were working forward and it was all being done. And so I actually just switched the switch off after year 3 and said, I'm going to get bright red. It tells me what their main risks are. That's reassuring. It doesn't tell you anything what they're doing behind it, because that's all in the risk register. And I do wonder whether there ought to be a supplementary part of this report that says, just broadly, this is what's being done. But if you think and you're sitting there saying it just doesn't make sense as you normally do, you would expect to have. It's not going to happen. Thank you.
Malcolm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the exact point on this. You know, I'm not expecting this to be green. It will never be green. But I think without understanding the detail behind it, you know, the mitigation actions, the contingency actions that work, and it's not, you know, thousands of pages. It's maybe 1 page per risk or something that just has that level of detail. I'm struggling. You know, the recommendation on this on 3.1 says members are asked to accept the position. I'm struggling to accept it. I can note it. I'm struggling to actually say I can accept it.
I probably concur with that. I think what's refreshing to hear from James is that this is actively being worked on, because the danger is always red, so everybody just ignores it because it never changes. But, you know, what we need to hear is that it's driving the improvement plans and the work and the improvement for and all the things that are happening is focused on the risk register. And maybe that should be what our recommendations are. There's just one little thing I was going to raise is I can't actually see on the corporate risk a failure to meet statutory obligation. I don't know whether that's been scored and scored low, but as we're getting into financial emergency, there is an increasing risk that we will not be doing something we're statutory in any service that we're statutorily required to do. I was at a briefing from Viola, and it seems unlikely, for instance, that we'll have food waste. Well, it seems impossible. We'll have food waste collections ready for the 1st of April. Lots of other councils won't as well. I do get that. We're not alone in that, but it is a statutory obligation. I don't know how high a risk that is to the organisation in terms of costs or credibility or anything else, but it does seem as though it ought to be scored alongside. It's not actually there as a criteria along this idea, so I don't know where that goes back to, but it does seem to be something I'd like to recommend.
Yeah, I think we could take that into the review in the autumn with the senior team.
But a few people now have got Carl and Nigel. I don't know who was first. Nigel.
It's interesting you should raise that, because child services and adult services used to be on there for that specific reason, and they just stayed on and stayed on and stayed on. We said, actually, what's the risk? And then all of a sudden they said, do you know, you're right, and they were removed. So be careful what you wish for.
Carl.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I don't know if we have access to the risk register. I'm assuming we don't, so it would be good to be able to see those mitigations and acceptance in the background. One to note that could come down is a failure of officers and members to adhere to governance arrangements. So that was increased because of the new council, if I remember rightly. So I would expect over time, certainly a short period, to start seeing that one come down maybe.
Good challenge, I think, as we know. Okay, so I think recommendations are there's two things we'd like to look at. One is this issue that's just been raised about whether the scoring for that is correct, and just review that. And one is whether we're capturing the failure to meet statutory obligations and what that should be scored at. And then just generally to say, whilst we recognise that the situation, we urge that all people involved in managing risk in the organisation are making decisions based on controlling and reducing those risks. Just mindful of the words that we had from the CPA, which was something along the lines of we've no apparent appetite for controlling certain things. We do want to demonstrate that we have got a full appetite to doing all we can to reduce and manage these risks, notwithstanding that we recognise it's unlikely that they're going to be reduced in the first 6 months or so. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make any sense to Michelle at all. I'll give you some wording after. So I try and recap it again. So one would be that there's a couple of issues which we think need to be reviewed when the risk register is reviewed. that alludes to whether failure to meet a statutory obligation should be a corporate risk or scored as a risk. And the second one is whether the scoring on failure of officers and members to adhere to governance arrangements is still correctly scored, because the information you're right at the last meeting was that reflected the situation following the election, which perhaps we've moved over from now. And with that, rather than just accepting, we are seeking assurance that those in charge of actually monitoring the business are actually actively undertaking that, and that is informing all the planning and improvement work of the organisation. Is that a better attempt? I'll move that from the chair because I don't want to have to repeat it all over again. Is anybody happy to second that? Yeah, let's second that. Can we push our hands for that? Oh, yeah, I'm happy to add that to the recommendation that future reports adds on mitigation list. That's absolutely right, don't you? Yeah, in future. Okay. Thanks, Tom. The next thing is internal audit recruitment update. Some good news, I think, Barry, perhaps?
Chair. Yes, it is. And I think there's a bit of background and context to this because over the last since COVID, really, since 2020, the professional services recruitment market has been particularly difficult. I think Avatar, you probably agree with that from a recruitment perspective. So within local government, we've obviously seen that within professional services. Experienced and qualified auditors have been hard to come by, as well as professionally qualified financial accountants that within the finance service. But having said that, during 2025, we have had some positive outcomes in terms of our recruitment. So we undertook a recruitment process in April 25. Successful appointment was made to the principal IT audit position. Successful candidate started in July. One auditor position was also filled during that recruitment process. They started in June of this year. Further recruitment for a qualified and experienced senior auditor was completed in June. A further successful appointment was made there, and the candidate started in July. At the time that the report was written, there were 3 vacant posts within the structure. 2 career graded senior auditor/senior auditor positions. Further recruitment for qualified and experienced senior auditors was completed earlier in September. Now, this isn't detailed within the report. This coincided with another auditor leaving the team, and I'm delighted to say that we've been able to make offers to 3 candidates, which will add further capacity into the team. Start dates for those are due to be finalised, and we're working through the pre-employment checks for those at the moment. So we're just working through that process. So the additional capacity will obviously be built into the next revision of the internal audit plan, and you'll see the growth in the capacity within that, and additional areas that we'll cover as part of the 25-26 internal audit plan. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm delighted with this update. The previous audit committee, in its last meeting before the elections, expressed very deep concerns about recruitment, and so this, I think that's been addressed really. So I'm really happy with that. Thank you.
Yes, good news. Any other comments, Malcolm?
Yeah, sorry, just to be clear, have you now filled all your vacant posts as of today, or have you still got 1 open? Right, okay. And then from a financial perspective, basically you said you've taken out 1 head, is that right? One post has gone? Yes. Okay, it's fine. Thank you.
And I was a bit unclear about the savings. There's lines on savings. Is there savings still to be can we fill the vacant posts we've got without with the savings targets being set? I suppose I'm trying to ask.
It's a debate. It's a debate, Chair. It's I think in a sense it's been a moot point because we haven't been able to recruit. The conversations that Barry, Katie, and I have been having have been go out, see who is available. If people are available that meet minimum criteria, then we'll have the discussion. So that's where we've been, and that's where we've been able to recruit more than would initially have been considered where those opportunities arise. The reality is that the level of turnover that we've seen and we're seeing within lots of these kind of functions means that I can't give any guarantee that we are ever going to have a full team. The savings that are taken out, it comes back to the point actually that was raised earlier about the kind of the corporate savings. There's a big chunk of money there that's yet to be delivered. One way to deliver that would be to say start to take posts out of service areas. So it is a debate that we're constantly having. Right now, there's no decision on that. Right now, we've got some new individuals in post. We've got more coverage across the ground. That means that we can go above that minimum level that we had before, and therefore we will consider that in the next few weeks.
Okay, thanks for that. My understanding is the one vacant post is the senior auditor for an investigation position. And as you'll be aware, there was a discussion at council yesterday, which means that will probably come to our next meeting in November anyway, regarding Ford. Okay, I think no recommendations is to note. If that's moved, I'll move that from the chair. Seconded by Mark. Hands. Thank you very much. I'll move on to your second report now.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Any chance of a 5-minute break for a cup of tea and a warm up?
Yeah, 5 minutes break. Sorry, we've just got to wait till we get offline. No, good call. Good call. Okay, we're up to item 11, and Barry, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the internal audit performance update report. The report provides members with an update on audit work undertaken in the first 5.5 months of the 25-26 internal audit plan. In total, 26 final reports have been issued in the period to the 17th of August 2025. All are listed with their assurance rating and are broken down by service area at paragraph 8.4. 4 draft reports are issued and awaiting management responses, and these will be included within the next internal audit performance report into the November Audit Committee. Work has also commenced for external clients, in addition to the drafting and auditing of financial statements for external clients and certification of grant claims for Shropshire Council. So in the period up to the 17th of August 2025, 9 reports have been issued providing good and reasonable assurances. This accounts for 35% of the opinions delivered. It's notable that this represents a significant decrease in the higher levels of assurance during the period compared to 83% for the same reporting period in 2024-25 and the previous year outturn of 58% in total across the financial year. This is offset by a corresponding increase in the limited and unsatisfactory assurances, currently 65% for the period compared to 17% in the same period of 2024-25 and the total previous year outturn of 42% across the financial year. Whilst it's early in the 25-26 reporting cycle, and we've obviously heard a lot about the changes, the corporate peer review, the improvement programme, the higher proportion of lower assurances delivered within the reporting period today is a concern. A total of 175 recommendations have been made within those 26 final reports that have been issued during the period. The breakdown of these by audit recommendation rating is shown at paragraph 8.4, and 1 fundamental recommendation has been made, which is detailed within paragraph 8.10. Details of limited and unsatisfactory assurance levels are detailed within Appendix A, and there's the question as to whether members would like to seek any further assurances on those from managers and service leads within those particular areas. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Okay, any questions or thoughts on the question 1? No.
Yeah, sorry, me again. So I think to say that sort of lumping the good and reasonable together to be 35%, actually good, there's nothing. And particularly if you look at, I was drawn to section 8.13, which is direction of travel. And over the last 6 or so years, the good has gone from, in this around 20% down to nothing. So that's not a good direction of travel. So I note that particular point. And then I think the other point was the 5 unsatisfactory audits that have been done. One of them is the Lantern, which obviously we were hoping to discuss today. But are the other 4, are they coming to this committee in terms of reports? Will we see that? Will we have a chance to discuss those particular ones? Because I guess those are the ones that we particularly want to have a view on and a bit of more scrutiny on. Thank you.
Yeah. So if the details of all of the complete audits are within the report, you can see those within the appendix. So any of those areas with the lower assurances that you've picked up on there is whether the committee would like any further updates on those particular areas. Any views on which ones we want updates on, them all or some of them, or? Michael.
I was concerned about the deferred payments and also the telecoms contract procurement. That particular one. The one fundamental one, if we've had an update on it, I perhaps need to seek Barry's advice on it as to whether that one now's maybe cleared up a little bit.
The fundamental recommendation that's detailed is in relation to the short breaks follow-up, and it's a procurement issue. Obviously, within the final audit report that was issued, the management response that's detailed within there is the response as it stands at the moment. It's whether the committee would like further assurance from the service area as to whether that recommendation has been implemented as per the management response, or what the progress is against that recommendation, noting the target implementation date of the 1st of April 2026. So in the normal way with that recommendation, we would follow it up as part of our normal follow-up process. It's whether in the interim you would want to seek any further assurances on that.
What's the financial scale of short breaks? I mean, how much in terms of, is it material, I suppose I'm saying, in terms of the actual sums involved?
Yeah, I can't comment on the exact figures on that.
Okay. Hey, Charles?
Yeah, I agree with Nigel when it comes to commission and deferred payments and something you look at. I also raised other areas of limited assurance, and one that stood out to me was, or two stood out. One was VAT issues in VAT compliance and accounting, and kind of trying to understand what them issues are. And also IT asset management, snow IT asset management, weakness tracking, inventory management. I'd like to know more about that. I've got some concerns around asset management, and I can't remember what the word is. Sorry, you have to forgive.
So audit committee members will have access to all of the final audit reports. We're in the process of making those available, so you will be able to see that full report to get the detail on the specific controls that were looked at as part of that review.
Kate.
Thank you, and I think it was because of Councillor Rowley's question a couple of committees ago that we're now getting access to those reports. I've got a question. I sometimes ask you questions that you're not able to reply because of your independence. So apologies if this is one of them. I suppose it's in the broader sense. Obviously, we can see the direction of travel here isn't good in terms of the, overall limited assurance and the assurance we're getting from the internal audits that you are doing. Are you able to give an opinion on your involvement in the future of these future plans as a result of the peer review and the planning? Do you feel that audit is being involved thoroughly in the next steps?
Absolutely, yeah. I do feel comfortable that I'm fully cited on all of the decision making that's happening across the organisation. I meet on a regular basis at the moment. That's weekly with James as Section 151 officer. We also have a monthly governance meeting that we meet with the monitoring officer as well as Section 151. And we discuss these types of issues within that. In terms of the improvement planning, and obviously there's two sides to that. There's providing the assurance on that, and there's obviously inputting into it from a control environment perspective as well. So providing consultancy and advice and guidance on the controls that need to be put in place as part of those processes. So I'm personally comfortable in my role as the chief audit exec that I've got sight of those issues, and I'm able to input and support that process. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really reassuring.
Good to hear. Okay, so we've got a proposal that we have further updates on both short breaks and deferred payments, I think was considered in terms of question 1. I think the other aspect of this is that we had invited the chief executive and leader to one of our meetings going back in May. They haven't been able to make it. We perhaps understand why now. So that request still stands, but it will now be November, I suppose, before they're able to join us. And I just think that's an awful long time down the line, given the speed at which things are happening. So I don't know, it's wish of the audit committee, but it might be appropriate for myself and Kate as vice chair, and to just talk to the leader and chief executive. The issue being that we've had 6 years of limited assurance, and that hasn't changed. What is being done now to ensure that we are putting ourselves on a different trajectory, given the light of this report suggests that we've still got issues when we're doing the internal audit. So I suppose it's just a lot of information to make you aware. Okay, are we happy to move on that basis? Okay, well, seconded by Carl, vote on that, and we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. To the next item. Sorry, my laptop's playing up, or I'm playing up, one or the other. It's too cold, probably. It's it work well enough, isn't it? One copy of myself, that helps. Oh dear, so I have to scroll through. I will get there. Right, okay, so we've got the terms of reference next, haven't we, of course? So I don't know if there's any comments on the terms of reference. They're fairly standard as set. Any questions or comments? There's just one question I'd like to throw at you and see what you think. When we enlarged the committee, part of my thinking was that there may be, and I haven't got any proposals, but there might be a time when we want a couple of members of the Audit and Governance Committee to look into a particular topic. Could be internal audit, it could be any topic really, couldn't it? And sort of report back. I suppose that's a working group. As the remit stands, we haven't got the powers to convene a working group to do that. I think in the past it might have been done informally, but if anybody challenges it, it's not within the remit, and I'm told it would be good practice for that to be in the remit. So it's a question to you whether you think we'd ever want to do that, and if so, we'll ask for those powers to be put into the remit when it goes back to council. Carl.
Yeah, Chair, I welcome that idea. I think it'd be a really good idea. There are a number, even now I have a couple lined up that we could possibly look at. I won't mention them just yet, but you know, I think it would be a good idea for us to have them working groups and take a closer look at some subjects.
Any other views? Are we happy to suggest that then? So that would be okay. Nigel, sorry.
Just interested to what a working group would do. It's interesting, councillors. I've got a couple of ideas. The purpose of this committee is to scrutinise the work of audit committee. I just wondered what a working group is going to do, because I hope it's not going to go scuttling off and start doing scrutiny work and that sort of thing. So I'm a little bit concerned about what actually a working group would want to do.
I suppose my thoughts were there could be a need to have a more detailed dive into a particular area, and we've got particular members on the committee who've got particular expertise in that area, and they can then report back to this committee. It's only reporting back to this committee with the knowledge they gain. But I don't want to be prescriptive, because it would be up to the committee to decide if it ever decides to create such a group. And the committee may decide never to do so, but it's a question whether we should have the power to do so if it so wishes in the future.
I think we have to be rather careful. A former council that I was a member of had a chair in a similar position who liked once a year to take a little working group off to go and ruffle through a pile of invoices and try and track where they'd gone, and take up an awful lot of officer time in achieving absolutely nothing in terms of proper audit and scrutiny, except to making themselves feel better that they'd looked at some things and that they could track them through. They never found anything apart from a minor thing. And I think there are paid officers to do that sort of work, and actually they're already stretched. I think we need to make sure that if we do anything, it's something that is constructive and isn't just going to waste officers' time in making a few of us feel better that we've done something. So I would have some reservations, is all I would say.
Don't disagree with those comments. There's obviously a good way of doing most things, and including working groups. Mark.
Yeah, concur with the previous speaker. I would feel happier if we actually had a dedicated example put before us when it actually occurs, because that would then focus our attention on what the chair has in mind. So if, as Councillor Rowley said, that he's got something in mind, and that is then brought to us as an example, we can then move forward to determine whether a working group would actually be useful.
Yeah, I mean, probably maybe we just leave a debate here. I'm reluctant to say this is a particular example because it might not be the example we ever use. I think the concept is, do you ever think there'll be a time when 2 or 3 people from the committee could do some worthwhile work and report back to committee? The difficulty about suddenly coming up to that point is at that point we may not have the power to do it because it's not in our remit, and this is the one time we get a chance to put it into our remit, albeit we might never use it. Whether we actually ever use it is a separate question. We'd have the power to do it. But I mean, if there's concern or worry about it, we can just move on and deal with everything in the committee. It's not a great problem. It was just about a more effective way of working, perhaps.
Which is why I suggested we wait for the situation to arise and then we can react to that.
It's just our remit set by council. So technically, if tomorrow or today we decided we want to create a working group, we haven't got it in our remit, we'd have to go back to council, which doesn't meet very often, then they have to come back to us, by which time 6 months have gone. It's just trying to save that time. My sense is that there's no overwhelming desire to do this, and we'll probably just move on. So that's not a great problem. Nigel.
I can actually think of an example that you could consider, to be fair. A previous audit around strategic risk, we had the risk register up on the board here, and we went through some and we were reassured that that was there and it was good. I do wonder whether a small working group could go and look at that specific thing, have a look at and see what's done, and then report back and say, actually, we're reassured that the whole system around it, because we have reassurance from the officers it's going on, but that might be an example where we could. In fact, I've changed my mind.
Malcolm.
Yeah, and so this is me not understanding the ways of local government. So what prevents us in that terms of reference from doing what you've just said?
No, it doesn't say we can do it. And that's said to me because it says we can't do it because it doesn't say we can do it. That has been said to me. So I don't, I'm not a lot. We've got a lawyer in the back of the room there to advise us, but in the absence of the power, you haven't got the power. It's been said to me. That's when you set the remit, you set the limits of it, and if you don't give the power, it's not there. No, we're not. We're not making formal decisions, but I think, if I'm honest, it's been suggested to me this may have been done informally in the past, but I'm not too sure whether that means what we can do with that. I'm not, if there's a doubt over it, I'd rather have it cleared up.
Perhaps just so that we have the ability to do it, but we have something within there on the vote of the committee, yes. which would maybe allay fears if some of us are wanting to scurry off and look through people's filing cabinets.
Absolutely clear. This could only be done by the committee setting up the party, setting its remit for the party, and the working group, whatever we're going to call it, and when it reports back. So the whole thing is determined by the audit committee. There's no individual going off with their own beliefs and so I propose it, as I've suggested it, that we seek the power to have a working group that would be determined by the committee and under the control of the committee. That's seconded. All those in favour of that? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, Fair enough. Internal audit charter and mandate, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. So this report, the internal audit charter and mandate is reviewed by the Audit and Governance Committee on an annual basis. There've been some changes this year in terms of the transition from the public sector internal audit standards to the global internal audit standards. So the charter establishes internal audit's position within the organisation, including the nature of the Chief Audit Executive's reporting relationship with you as the Audit and Governance Committee, and also provides that authorisation for access to personnel, access to records, access to physical properties relevant to audit work, and defines the scope of internal audit activities set out in Appendix A of the document. The senior management and board representatives for internal audit's clients' organisations are set out in Appendix B of the charter. Changes within the document are shown in bold, underlined with italic font. So CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Financial Accountancy, this year developed a new code of practice for the governance of internal audit in the UK public sector, and that was effective from April of this year. The code applies to all principal authorities in the UK local government, and is complementary to CIPFA's work on the replacement of the former public sector internal audit standards. I can confirm that the Council's internal audit function will adhere to the global internal audit standards, and we will complete a self-assessment during 25-26 against those standards, and the outcome of that will be reported to the Audit and Governance Committee, so you'll get some assurance around that. I think that's it, Chair.
Are we happy to endorse the charter and standards? Yep. Moved, seconded by Malcolm. All those in favour? Thank you very much. We move on to the interim audit findings from Grant Thornton for the Shropshire County Pension Fund. Oh, right. Okay. I can never see the screen very well. So who is? It's Grant.
Yeah,
Hello,
sorry,
Grant.
Chair. Hello, Chair. Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'm conscious that there's some new members on the committee today, so I'd probably just offer a quick recap of where we are. The council is the administering authority for the Shropshire County Pension Fund, and as a result of that, it has to produce a statement of accounts for the pension fund every year. That statement of accounts appears in two places. The first place is as part of the actual council statement of accounts, and the second place is within the pension fund's annual report. The council or the pub fund produces its annual report quite early. Therefore, what we do is, as part of our work, is effectively we audit the financial statements that are within the annual report. And a lot of our work, therefore, we report to the pensions committee that looks at the annual report in detail. As part of the overall governance arrangements you've got in place as a council, however, the Audit and Governance Committee is using audit terminology, those charged with governance, and therefore we do bring our audit findings report to yourselves as well, on the back of effectively the Pensions Committee. It was presented to them last Friday, has reviewed it and endorsed it, and I suppose is recommending overall approval to yourself. So that's the sort of rough background to the whole process. As I was saying, we've took the audit findings report to the Pensions Committee last Friday, and as it has been reviewed in details by them, I wasn't proposing to go through it in detail. In summary, we've not had to change our overall strategy and approach to the fund, to the audit of the fund. That was outlined in our audit plan that I have brought to a previous audit committee. However, just on receipt of the draft financial statements, we did revisit our materiality, and there were significant increases in the value of the fund because the fund is performing well. And therefore, and as our materiality is based upon the value of the assets, we did increase our materiality on the headline materiality, we call it, to just over 38 million. And it was at 28 million at planning. And in terms of the fund account, which is the income expenditure account, that's where the benefits payable and contributions go through, we increased that to just over 14 million pounds, up from about 13 million pounds at planning. But we've not had to change our overall strategy and approach. And I suppose the headline message is to you as Audit and Governance Committee is our audit work is substantially complete, and we are anticipating our opinion on the financial statements will therefore be unmodified or unqualified. So that's the headline. And when I say our work is substantially complete, we've badged the AFR as interim. That's primarily because the audit of the council is still ongoing, and I can't issue my opinion until the council audit is complete. And the one probably area of work that we might need to look at is there's one asset within the pension fund accounts, which is held by LGPS Central. They do produce audited accounts, but the last audited accounts were back at the end of March 24. The audited accounts for 24-25 are still in progress. If those audited accounts land, then we will need to probably look at those as sort of updated information. Our work to date does not suggest there are any issues, and my experience of that fund itself is I would not expect there to be any issues of it, but that is one thing we will need to look at if it does arrive before we issue the opinion. In terms of the audit itself, it's gone very well. We have not identified any adjustments to the financial statements that will impact upon the reported position. There is one 4.5 million, not 45, 4.5 million unadjusted differences in the valuation of the fund's investments that are disclosed in the accounts at the end of March. And that is primarily driven by you do close your accounts down early, but more up-to-date relevant information comes in after the close down process. It is not unusual. You might hear the word stale pricing elsewhere. So it's not an unusual occurrence. It's nothing to do with the fund in this case. It's just how long it takes investment managers to produce their capital statements. So there's a difference between what you put in the financial statements and actually what we know now as auditors. It's a very small percentage of the fund, and therefore management aren't proposing to adjust for it on the basis that it's not material quantitatively or qualitatively. And what you will be asked to do, or the letter of representation that was approved by Pensions Committee for James to sign, just recognise that you're not proposing to amend the accounts. There were a small number of classification disclosure changes. They're actually detailed on pages 125 to 127 of your pack. And also, we've not raised any recommendations for management as a result of our audit work this year. And I'm pleased to say that when following up recommendations from last year, they have been addressed by the fund. So there aren't any issues I really need to bring to your attention. The one slight difference in terms of your accounting is there's a financial instruments note, but you actually include non-financial instruments within that, but you do clearly state that. And the rationale behind that is to help a reader reconcile the numbers back to the net asset statements. So we understand that. And whilst it's a departure from the SIT for code, it's not something that I'm concerned about as your auditor. We've not identified any significant independence issues in relation to the audit, although I would bring to your attention the fact of that LPS Central, which is the pool with which we're in, is we do actually as a firm audit their service auditors report, but we're satisfied that it's done by a completely different team to me. I don't have any influence or over what work they do. Therefore, we're satisfied there's significant distance between us and them, and that it doesn't impact upon our independence, or that a reasonable person would do that. So I think those are the key things I'd probably just like to bring to your attention. But overall, I'll say it was a very smooth audit. It's gone well. We've got no issues really to bring to you, and we're proposing unqualified opinion once the council audit is completed. And happy to take questions.
Thanks, Grant, and pleased to hear it's smooth and going well. Any questions for Grant? Oh, stunned silence in the audit committee.
So just to note that I'm also on the pensions committee, so I did provide feedback as part of that committee last week. So
okay, our role is then to endorse it. Prove it.
Yeah, yes, it's just to confirm that you're comfortable with that. That's
Okay.
those charges we've got.
Have we moved that I confirm the audit committee is comfortable with that? Are you seconding it, Kate? Yeah, and we can have a vote show of hands. Thank you very much, Grant. Thanks for joining
Thank you very
us.
much. Okay.
Okay, so then the next item is we've just got the decisions log. I think quite a few of those issues have now been resolved. So just we'll review that ahead of the next meeting, but it looks as though to me as though quite a number of those items have now been met. Is it? So yeah, invite the leader. The invitation will stand for our next meeting in November for the leader and chief executive. I think the next one, the director of children's services, we've had that dealt with today. The size of the committee and change in title has been done, so that can come off. The draft corporate governance statement due in January. Wouldn't mind. I think the committee wouldn't mind some update on how the next governance statement will be produced. What's the process for it? But maybe we can have that on a future meeting. And then the internal audit report has been clarified. I have to say we haven't had every member sign the declaration. Quite a few members and substitutes have not done so. That's causing some admin issues. We can't allow, because until the best thing would be if everybody does it, then on block we can give everybody access. That doesn't seem to be happening, so we're going to have to give access to those who have signed, but it means that those who haven't signed may have to wait some time, but can't do much about that. So if you know your colleagues haven't signed, do please get them to sign.
I was about to say that I'm pretty sure I have done, but if people don't remember when they signed it, because it's going back a little way now, isn't it? Maybe they could be actually asked to.
I have written towards people who haven't signed, asked them to sign it, and I don't think it's produced any more signatures, has it? We've still got about 4 or 5 members who haven't, or substitutes who haven't signed, which is a bit disappointing. What I don't want to happen is that we then put things on the agenda and the expectations people have had access to the information, and somebody says I haven't. So all I can do is ask.
Do we know who hasn't signed? Maybe just contact them.
I've emailed them personally myself. That's about it. So I think we've done all we can, but we haven't quite got there. So we move into the exempt portion of the meeting, right? Date time and next meeting. Sorry, a very important thing. Date time and next meeting is set. Don't need to do anything other than note that. And then we move into exclusion of the press and public. So I resolve in accordance with provision of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act, Section 5, paragraphs 2, 3 and 7 of the Council's access to information rules. The public can best be excluded during consideration of the following items. So I move that. Seconded. Those in favour? Thank you very much. So the first, and we just cut the live stream. So.